Welcome to the Nerd Review. This is the show where we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, books, and comic books. Today you're listening to episode 16, and we are talking about the Santa Claus 1, 2, and 3 as we kick off, that's right, Christmas season. Oh, what's that? Oh, the music is changing. It is now officially Christmas. So let's enjoy some Christmas themes and talk about an amazing Christmas movies. One of the best Christmas franchises. The first two, probably not the third one. It exists. Definitely it exists, but it is maybe not considered one of the best Christmas movies out there. But they attempted something, that's for sure. And let's jump into that and talk about all that now. So to kick off the Christmas season, I wanted to start with my all-time favorite Christmas movies, and that is definitely the Santa Claus 1 and the Santa Claus 2. And the Santa Claus 3 definitely exists. It is a movie that was made. No, I'm kidding. It's not that bad of a movie. It's quite enjoyable still. I watched it recently. But let's start with the Santa Claus 1, filmed 1994. It was actually the year I was born, so I didn't get to see it. I wouldn't be watching it until probably 6 years later, which is the year the sequel comes out, which is, good timing for me to jump on board. I get to watch the first one and then right away enjoy the second one. No waiting in between for that sequel. So the first one comes out in 1994. It's directed by John Pasquin. He also directed a bunch of Home Improvement, 39 episodes of Home Improvement. So he had a good, relationship with Tim Allen already. He would go on to direct Miss Congeniality 2. So very good director. And, he did a great job with the Santa Claus. So it stars Tim Allen as Scott Calvin. He'll become Santa Claus. In there is Judge Reinhold as Neil, the lovable Neil with his terrible sweaters and his weird slow talking. I love that character. He's hilarious. Wendy Crewson as the ex-wife Laura, and Eric Lloyd as the young son Charlie Calvin. And the movie is it's quintessential Christmas. It's so everything about it so well designed. The sets are beautiful. The design of the sleigh, the Santa outfit is iconical. It's very classic Christmas, classic designs of what you expect Santa to look like. At least by the time I was a child, that's what I associated with Santa, and it was great growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Santa Claus 1, Santa Claus 2. I think the Grinch, Jim Carrey's Grinch, would come out around the same time, and it was just it was very magical time that I think about when I look back on, the holidays and this time of year. I'm very nostalgic, and I love tradition and what we do as a family, and, putting up the Christmas tree on the first weekend of December, and on the TV I'm going to have Santa Claus or Home Alone 1. And it's just such good memories. You're making cookies and you're putting the lights on the tree and you're doing the decorating and you're putting all the ornaments with all the good memories associated with all those ornaments. It's a magical time of year. So with that said, let's get into the Santa Claus. So I hope everybody knows what the Santa Claus is about, the first movie, at least the first movie. Maybe you weren't interested in the sequels. But the first movie is, this struggling dad. He's juggling, his job. He's a toy maker, which, coincidentally lines up with, being Santa. He understands the market. He's worked with, he needs to appeal to children and, make toys. So I like that symmetry there. And it's something that's been mentioned that at this time, in this time period of movies, there's always this setup of the main character is a dad that's like struggling between work and his kids, and oftentimes he's divorced or going through a divorce, and through the plot of the movie and the issues that he'll resolve through the movie, he ultimately becomes a better dad. And in the same thing in this, he'll become, like Scott becomes Santa, and when he becomes Santa, therefore he also becomes a better dad, and he understands the value of family and all that. So it was a very thematic thing, very popular theme of the 90s and early 2000s. So I noticed that, found that very funny. And right, so the plot of the first movie is, they hear something out on the roof and they go out and they find Santa and he slides off the roof. And Scott ends up putting on the suit and he agrees to the Santa Claus, that now he is replacing the former Santa and he's becoming Santa. And they have this magical night, and it is really really well captured, and it does feel magical. The music, the scoring is amazing. And that first trip to the North Pole, after he's delivered a few gifts, and that bag, that amazing they put that spell from Harry Potter on it, Expandio or whatever it is. I don't remember what the spell is, but makes it like infinite storage. I assume it's the same kind of magic that Santa has on this his bag of toys, and he's pulling out all these gifts and stuff. And then so that first trip to the North Pole, the music is just amazing Christmas music, and there's just that one elf and that one candy cane pole, and she presses the buttons and they spin around, and it's all Christmas music, and you see all the elves tacking away, and there's these big candy cane arches. Everything has all the arches have big candy canes, and you're introduced to Bernard David Krumholtz, who's amazing in Santa Claus 1 and 2, and then he would be too busy with numbers and too popular to return for the Santa Claus 3, but in Santa Claus 1 and 2 he's always been my favorite. I love Bernard, and so he's Santa's number 2. He's Santa's number 1. Number 2 is Curtis. We'll get to that. He's in the Santa Claus 2, but he's the number 1 elf, so he's technically Santa's number. Well, I guess but he is number 2, because if Santa's number 1, he's number 2, but he's the number 1 elf. So he's stamped as number 1 elf. And if you didn't get that point, and so he gives him the tour, and he explains that he put the coat on, and now he is Santa Claus. And they have this very nice evening, and Elf Judy comes, Paige, that was played by Paige Tamanda, and this very cute kid, and she has the cocoa, and she brings him to the room and gives him his pajamas, and they point out that Scott Calvin, it's the same initials as Santa Claus, and they fall asleep, him and Charlie, the young Eric Lloyd, and they fall asleep in the North Pole, and they wake up back in their house, and Scott is wearing the pajamas, and he's like, oh, that was one heck of a dream. And he comes out into the living room, and there's all these gifts that weren't there the night before, and Charlie is ecstatic. He remembers everything. They had this great time in the North Pole, and the movie goes on from there, from that this magical exploration of the North Pole, and Santa's this tour of Santa's workshop. And now I like that it kind of skips time. You don't really have much you're not dilly-dallying in between, so it kind of skips in between the 10 months in between Christmas and the next Christmas. So the movie technically takes place across 3 years, because it's 2 years. It's 2 years in this one. And I think the next one, it's always 2 years. No, it's always 2 years, because it's the time in between. There's the first Christmas, and then in between, and then it ends on another Christmas. So it would be 2 years. So 2 Christmases, and so just trying to get my timeline here in order. And during that time, Scott has to come to terms with being Santa Claus, and he gets the naughty and nice list, and his body starts to change, which it's been pointed out. I've read a lot of things, and even I, as upon rewatching it, you notice that this period of time, the becoming Santa Claus, is almost like a curse, like a bodily curse on you. He starts gaining weight, and he shaves his beard, and then it just grows back in the mirror, and he's just yep, I'm in trouble. It's very comical. It was very, very funny. And so let's not get too lost in a play-by-play of the movies, because if we want to cover all 3 movies, we need to pick it up a bit. So the first movie, he knocks Santa off his roof, and if you've seen the interviews with Tim Allen, you know that that there was a different script at one point, and it included him shooting Santa off his roof, much more like, you know, you're in Texas kind of thing, and like, hey, get off my roof, bang. And so they watered it down. It ended up being a Disney film, so maybe they were shopping around for different production companies. But so Santa falls off the roof, he puts on the suit, he's Santa Claus, he comes to term with it. There's some amazing scenes and amazing things that I didn't know about too. The reindeer are animatronic. They're animatronic reindeer. The sounds of the reindeer, of Comet and Donner, are reused sound effects from the Doom video game. That's one of the things on the trivia page that I found really interesting. Eric Lloyd, the child, he lost his two front teeth during filming of the movie, and they had to create prosthetics for him. He had a little dentures plate that he had to put in for the filming of the movie so that he would have front teeth. That was pretty funny. There was some really cool featurettes. They did a lot of work around the movie too, to be inclusive and like make it seem that it was very like Scott was Santa and this was like real magic for children. So there was a featurette called So You Want to Be an Elf. That was Bernard, and he was going around with a few kids showing them how to tie bows and make, you know, toys and stuff. And I mean, he was pretty intense. At one point the kids like putting a bow on a present, and it's pretty loose, and Bernard comes over and he's like, this one's kind of loose. You know, Santa got stuck in a chimney once, and you know you wouldn't want that to happen again. He couldn't get out. That ribbon got stuck on a wall, and he wasn't able to move. And I was like, oh, that's kind of intense. What happened to that, Santa? Like, did you have a rescue team? And in another scene right before this featurette wraps up, there's a letter to Santa, and this kid is asking for a little brother or sister, and Bernard's like, oh, well, that's a job for the stork, and he puts it in a pile that has a little photo of a stork on it. And I just think the implications of this are hilarious, that in this world, not only does Santa Claus exist, and he brings gifts that, you know, nobody bought, and, you know, apparently maybe the parents have some form of amnesia, or it's like part of the magical spell that they're like, you know, oh yeah, I guess I bought that canoe. In the first movie, he pulls a canoe out of that bag and just leaves it lying up against the wall, and you just expect like the parents to wake up and be like, I didn't buy that canoe, did you? And so, like, I don't understand how parents and how adults in this world don't believe in Santa Claus with all these gifts popping up. And apparently, according to this featurette, that all that has to happen is that one of your kids requests a baby brother or sister from Santa, and they just hand that off to the stork. They a little outsourcing there, and then, you know, now you're gonna get a kid with apparently no input from you. Just kid pops up. Like, do you magically get pregnant? You're just at work one day and you're just like, oh, pregnant now. the magical implications of this make this this Santa Claus universe even more hilarious. So I mean, it was a very enjoyable little featurette, and it was the work all around this movie to really dial up the magic. It's evident they put a lot of effort into it, and they made it really, you know, feature rich. I mean, it's a featurette for kids, you know, to really believe in this magical universe of Santa Claus, and I think that's great. And I mean, the movie had a budget of $22 million, and it was a huge success. It made $144 million at the box office, and to this day, it's considered such an amazing Christmas movie. I loved it. I've loved it since I first saw it. I was probably, like I said, I was probably 6, maybe 7 years old. And then Santa Claus 2 comes out, like literally probably the same year that I'm watching the Santa Claus and like actually digesting, because maybe I saw it when I was 3, 4 years old, because it did come out 1994. But it wasn't until probably, you know, I'm 6, like 7 years old that I really like appreciate this movie, around the same age as Charlie was Eric Lloyd, the actor that plays Charlie, and that you identify with that character, and you picture yourself like with your dad going on this amazing adventure, and like I could easily recall thinking and imagining that like I was Charlie, and that it was my dad that goes up onto the roof and he becomes Santa Claus, and we get to go on this amazing adventure, and that's something that resonates. And I still you imagine those fantastic scenarios of like, what if this was me? And so definitely when I was 6-7 years old, the Santa Claus became an absolute favorite. And then I was so fortunate that 2002 Santa Claus 2 comes out, and so let's jump into the Santa Claus 2 now. So it would be 8 years, I believe I said 6 years before, but it's 8 years between 1994 and 2002. Between Santa Claus 1 and Santa Claus 2, which is amazing that how long it took them to make sequels back in the day compared to how it takes less than a year in some cases to make a sequel these days. And even on a successful movie like the Santa Claus, it made $144 million at the box office, and it's considered this amazing Christmas movie that it took them 8 years to get around to making the sequel. But in some ways it's nice that they waited so long, because Eric Lloyd comes back, he reprises his role as Charlie, and it's nice that he's grown up a bit, he's in middle school, he's rebelling a bit, and they wrote this really, in my opinion, it's an amazing script. The plot and the way that it moves Santa Claus and introduces these extra legendary figures, and they're still Santa Claus is still a person, and he has a life to juggle with the responsibilities of being Santa, and he's a dad. And according to Tim Allen, that was part of what they wanted to portray. They wanted to show this mythical creature that also has to juggle the responsibilities of being a parent, and I think they did that in a really effective way. And then to introduce the Mrs. Claus, like in the first one it was the Santa Claus, he put on the suit and became Santa, and now in this one he has to find his Mrs. Claus to remain Santa. And then they introduce all these extra elements. Charlie's on the naughty list, and it was really good. I mean, and according to Tim Allen, and there's some one of the interviews I watched, he mentions that he wanted it to be kind of more of an action Santa film for the kid in the adult, so for all of us grown-up kids like myself. And the movie opens on where they're in like the elf version of like air traffic control, and they're monitoring the space above the North Pole, and there's a plane going over, and it's a cargo plane, but I guess they have the equipment on board to look for oil, which I believe is just like a sonar in tune kind of technology, but they're picking up music and the sound of all the little elves. And the scene is actually homage to Run Silent, Run Deep, one of Tim Allen's favorite movies, and it also pays homage to all the Western movies. At the end, the final scene with the two Santa, the chase scene, and Tim Allen is jumping from the reindeer to the sleigh, and this was homage to the Western movies. And that is just it's really cool that it's a Santa movie, it's a holiday movie, it's a kids movie, a lot of people would say, but there was still good references to older movies and Western movies, and there was a very good approach, just like the first one, a very wholehearted approach to let's make a really good movie that is also a holiday movie, a kids movie, a Disney movie, but there's some good references and some really you have to be quite familiar with films to pick up on this reference to Run Silent, Run Deep, or have seen Western movies where you see cowboys jumping from their horse to the cart to the buggy, and that's not for, I mean, it's for the kids, but at the same time, to reference what Tim Allen said, it's for the kid in the adult. We were all kids one day, and once upon a time, and we grew up watching movies, and these were movies that we liked, and then to see something like this where they took the time and they crafted it it stands the test of time because it made the movie what it is, and what it is a great movie. So the second movie obviously gets an elevated budget. They bumped the budget up from the $22 million the first one had in 1994 to $65 million in 2002, and that really lent itself to creating and really fleshing out Santa's entire village. So not just his workshop or his room, but his entire village, his office, his house, his quarters. You have that whole big square where they play tinsel football, and you can see that they spent that $65 million. They had another kind of featurette, kind of like the first one, So You Want to Be an Elf, but this one was inside the North Pole with Curtis. That was the new addition to the cast. Spencer Breslin. He's a great actor. He's very funny. He was very young at the time, and he's kind of like taking everyone around the set and in character. He's getting his his elf ears sparkled by the makeup crew, and he's showing everybody around, and there's this fun camaraderie and butting of heads between him and Bernard, David Krumholtz, who returned for this sequel. They're going around and sniping at each other, very similar to the way they snipe at each other in the movie. And Curtis is going on about how Bernard is just he's threatened by him, and he's paranoid that Curtis is coming for his number one position, because in the Santa Claus 2, Curtis is the number 2 elf, and he's supposed to be the one in charge of like all the legal work, I guess, like the Santa Claus, and Bernard is blaming him for forgetting to bring up the Mrs. Claus before now. And basically the deadline for the Mrs. Claus is like this Christmas, and so they have only a few months for Santa to find his wife, and so they kind of extended this into the featurette, and he's talking to the director about how he's gonna be he wants to be the number 1 elf, and Bernard's got to watch his back and all that. And it's quite funny because if you look at the third movie, and David Krumholtz doesn't come back, and so in the third movie, Curtis, Spencer Breslin, he returns for his role as Curtis, but now he actually is the number 1 elf, which I just think is hilarious, because like that was the whole heads butting, and Curtis was saying like, I'm gonna be number 1 elf, and then it's quite funny because he what did he do to Bernard? What happened to Bernard, man? I'll come back to this, but we might find out what happened to Bernard and where he was and what he was up to, because we have the new Disney Plus series to look forward to, and I've only watched the first 2 episodes now that the Santa Clauses, and we'll get to that in a bit, but let's continue here on the Santa Claus 2, and we'll get to Santa Claus 3 shortly. So this little featurette thing was really cute, very similar to the first one, and so in this one, like I said, Santa Claus has to get married, and so basically the entire first cast came back. Judge Reinhold, Wendy Crowson, obviously Tim Allen, Eric Lloyd. Like I said, Spencer Breslin was an addition. He was part of a new cast that was added on for the new movie. Included in that was Elizabeth Mitchell playing Carol. She would be the future Mrs. Claus. Lillian Mummy, at the time she was the younger sister to Charlie. I mean, she would still be his younger sister, but she's much older now. She played Lucy Miller. That's Laura and Neil's daughter, so like I said, Charlie's little sister. And I want to point out that in the legendary the Legendary Figures Council, there's a few people. The Tooth Fairy, Art LaFleur, Tamara Taylor is playing Mother Nature, and playing Father Time is Peter Boyle. And what is interesting about that, this is a little fan theory that I have, is he was in the first movie. Peter Boyle's in the first movie. He's Scott Calvin's boss, his real boss at the toy company. And in the second movie, he's Father Time. There's no explanation. There's no connection. Nobody ever mentions this in the movie. Apparently in Santa Claus 2, Peter Boyle is uncredited for his role as Father Time, which is surprising because he has like multiple scenes and lines in the movie. But so in my fan theory now, it's that he was always Father Time, and in the first movie he was leading Scott to the coming to the conclusion that he had to be Santa. And there's even a scene when Scott's at work. So we're going back a bit. We're backtracking to the first movie a bit. In the first movie, when Scott is a bit overweight now, he's becoming Santa, and he this was after the total tank part in the first movie where like Santa was gonna ride a tank. Now this was a really weird part where they're trying to like market new Santa to like kids and stuff as part of the military, I guess. And he goes off the rails, and he's like, no, we can't have that Santa. So they go out of the room, and his boss, who's Peter Boyle, he talks to him, and he's like, you need to figure out what's going on, maybe take some time off, and like figure yourself out. And in the time, you probably think that like the boss, not like he's worried about his weight. He can be seen as like a good guy. He's trying to like look out for his employee. Now I think he was Father Time. And I think that he was telling Scott, like take some time off of work and focus on what's really important. And what was really important was figuring out that he needed to be Santa. So that's my little fan theory there. So yeah, so he's in the second movie. And in the second movie, we'll go over the plot really quickly here. In the second movie, Santa's up in the North Pole, and he finds out about the Mrs. Claus. That's what Curtis explains to him. And in one of the best lines of the whole movie, and one of the best deliveries of the whole movie, is from Spencer Breslin when Santa starts to become like, he's losing his Santa appearance, and he's going to lose his magic soon, and his beard gets shorter, and his stomach, shrinks in, and Curtis is just like, the desantification process has begun. And that was like, I can't even do it justice, but his delivery of that line is absolutely hysterical. And from there, you find out that Charlie is on the naughty list, and he needs to go home and try to figure out what's wrong with Charlie. And at the same time, he has to try to find a wife, so he's going on some dates. And it's a great plot, honestly. I think they did a good job of their intention of mixing the idea that Santa is also a person, and he's juggling work and his home life. And as he goes through the movie, he starts to realize that his job has an effect on his home life, and he realizes that one of the reasons that Charlie is rebelling is because he feels repressed, and he can't tell any of his friends or anybody that he cares about what his dad does for a living. In his words, my dad has the best job of all, and I can't tell anybody. Everybody talks about how my dad's a plumber or a dentist or a cop, and my dad is Santa Claus, but I can't share that with anybody. And then they bring in Lucy into the fold, and she finds out who Santa Claus is, and through this Charlie figures out, he has to respect the secret of Santa Claus, and that it's a family secret, and that they keep it together. And so this, I haven't really mentioned what is probably the funniest and the craziest part of this plot, was that to allow Santa to leave, they had to come up with, like a fake Santa, or all the elves would freak out. Apparently the elves are super fragile, and if Santa steps out of the room for an extended period of time, they're going to have a meltdown, is what we're basically told at the beginning of the movie by Curtis and Bernard. So they decide to clone, or like create a toy clone of Santa. This is done by tripling the RAM, and I can tell you, in my day job as an IT support, I've never heard of a machine that would allow you to clone somebody by tripling the RAM. I don't know what its intention was at the beginning. I guess it was to clone toys. It was to make copies of toys, and by somehow giving it more power, it would allow them to make copies of humans, like of another person. But this is totally conjecture, because all Curtis said was like, I've been up all night and I tripled the RAM, and Santa's like, wait, you tripled the RAM? I'm not getting in that machine. Like, well, that was a leap of logic, but okay, let's just so they do clone Santa, and you get this like faux Santa, which is Tim Allen with less rosy cheeks. He had more of like a plastic veneer face, and according to Tim Allen, he had a blast as the fake Santa, because the fake Santa is very black and white, and he talks in a very funny, well, this is wrong, and this is right, and as according to the rules, this is what happens, so there is no gray zone. And so he wants to give coal to everybody, and then in a very weird turn in a Disney movie, he turns into a dictator, like full military, black military outfit adorned with the medals and the sashes, and he creates his own toy soldier army, and he like puts like the entire elf community into like, they're just coal miners now because all kids are terrible and they all deserve coal. And so like Santa finds out that like the North Pole has been taken over by her evil twin, and so like now that he's somewhat, so he kind of like falls in love, and he blows it all when he tries to tell her that he's Santa, but he has no magic left and he has no way of actually proving that, which is one of those funny things, like you are Santa but you have no way of proving it now, like how are you supposed to prove it with no magic? So they manage to incorporate some of the legendary figures. The Tooth Fairy comes back, and they manage to get up to the North Pole, and so that leads to the showdown that I was mentioning at the end. He has to grab one of the lone reindeer that was introduced earlier in the movie. They do a really good job of callbacks in the movie, introducing the Tooth Fairy, and then having him help them at the end. At the beginning of the movie, they introduce a new reindeer in training, Chet, who he crashes a lot. He has like a minute and a half of flight time total, and then at the end he's the only reindeer available that's not attached to Santa's sleigh, that is now being piloted by evil Santa with a bag full of coal. So real Santa, Scott, has to ride Chet, who has no flight time and is still in training, and try to catch up to the sled being pulled by Donner and Blitzen and all these super seasoned trained reindeer. So that was the western scene, and it has like Santa jumping off of Chet and into the sleigh, and then they're having a showdown, and that part really is western style, because they're holding the reins, right, and the cart, the sleigh is basically a cart. It's basically like a buggy, and then eventually they lose the reins and they're crashing, and it leads to some shenanigans, and it's pretty funny. And the second movie wraps up with they've defeated evil Santa, and Charlie brings Carol, who I didn't mention, but Carol was his his middle school, high school. It's hard to tell. I don't know what grade they are in the States. So we'll say it's middle school, high school. And it's his principal. It's the principal of his school. That's who Scott falls for. And they have a pretty good relationship, in the sense that they've known each other for like 3 weeks, maybe a month. And Scott he used some of his magic to like really impress her, and she has a moment and falls for him, and they kiss under the mistletoe, and that was very nice. I think it was a pretty well romantic comedy aspect of the Santa Claus 2. And then Charlie has to convince her that his dad is actually Santa, and he uses the snow globe. And that very good callback to the snow globe that Bernard gave him at the end of the first movie, that all he had to do was shake it and his dad would come. So when she shakes it, it explodes in all this like, it doesn't explode, but inside the snow globe there's all this snow flurrying around, and then it reveals like the actual like a top-down perspective on the North Pole, and she believes, and then she shows up in the North Pole with Charlie and everybody. They come and help rescue them, and she has to basically accept that he's Santa Claus, and that she's going to be, his partner and Mrs. Claus, and that at the moment she accepts this, and that, she professes her love, he becomes Santa Claus instantly. His beard grows back, and all the weight comes back on, and his coat, I'm not sure if he was already wearing the coat, but he was just super skinny, but yeah, his whole outfit comes back, and he's Santa Claus again. And I believe there's a small scene at the end where they tease Mrs. Claus, but that was you have to wait to season 3, the third movie. You have to wait 2 years, because they figured out that sequels are better when you don't wait almost a decade in between them. So they in the third movie, you get to see Mrs. Claus finally, but not the way that you see her in the Santa Clauses. So she's still kind of like hair down, dressing more normal. She doesn't have her big like red coat and her hair up in a bun yet, but that's to come. That's to come. So so like I said, the second movie made a huge box office splash. Well, sorry, the budget was $65 million, and the box office made even more than the first one, $172.9 million, which is, I mean, that's not nothing. The two movies together made almost just over $300 million, which is amazing. So it makes sense that the next movie, the Santa Claus 3, would come out much sooner. We only had to wait 2 years, 2006, and I'm still roughly maybe still believing in Santa Claus. By 2006, I'm at the end of elementary school, maybe starting high school. It would come out, most likely it came out in December of 2006, which would mean that I was already in high school. So I'll say I wasn't still believing in Santa Claus by that point, but I still respected the magic. To this day, I still respect the magic of Santa Claus. I would never go around and shield your kids' ears if they're listening. I would never tell somebody that Santa Claus doesn't exist, because it's an amazing thing that we do, and probably one of the best things that we do as a society is allow kids to have magic in their lives and to grow up believing in Santa Claus. It's this cohesive like agreement that we've all made, that you just want to keep that innocence and that childhood magic alive for as long as possible. And then as they grow up, we grow up and we recognize what was done for us, and we want to continue it for the next generation so that they can experience this magical time. And around the holidays, I think it's so important. It's so magical, and it's so meaningful too. I mean, just for myself, if from my experience and in my opinion, I had so many magical Christmases, and I look back on them with so many fond memories, because that is the magic of our world. It's this make-believe innocence that is allowed to run rampant for the first 11 years of your life. You get to have, like, the world is anything, the world is possibility, it's magic, and then it doesn't wean out, but it changes in form, and you have more of a respect and an understanding for what it means to have magic. And that I think Christmas is a big part of that. I think the holidays is a big part of that, and these movies, in my opinion, is a big part of that. It's a big part of the magic of childhood and the magic of Christmas. Yeah, if I can wrap this tangent up in a little bow and present it as a Christmas present, that is what it would be. And so to have these movies and to be able to revisit them every year is something that's really special, in my opinion. So let's go on to the Santa Claus 3. We'll start with the budget stuff. It's an estimated $12 million budget, which is weird. So there's no reported budget for the Santa Claus 3, which is weird. Every other movie, you just type in Santa Claus budget, you get a figure. It's on the Wikipedia page, it's on the Box Office Mojo page, it's on everything. But you type in Santa Claus 3, no budget, estimated $12 million, which is really low. It's surprisingly low, considering that they added Martin Short to the cast. They added Carol's parents. There's extra actors in the movie, though. And all of this stuff, they still have VFX and everything. And then to consider that it would be a smaller budget after the last one, which had a $65 million budget and made over $100 million, or almost $200 million, $172 million at the box office. It's mind-boggling and kind of weird to think that it would have only a $12 million budget. I did, however, read that if you look at the movie, they did reuse a lot of the sets, so it wasn't in Santa Claus 2, $65 million budget, they built all of these new sets, Santa's village, Santa's workshop, his house, all of that. They reuse it for the second one. So arguably you could take that down in the budget. They didn't really build any new sets. If you watch the new one, there's like one closet style room with like a freaking Red Bull machine because you need your advertisement money. And that would it's like a broom closet would be like, if I'm going out of my way here, that's like the only new set in that movie. And then maybe for 2 minutes I'll get to it in a second, in the alternate version of the timeline, which plays into the plot of the Santa Claus 3, you see Tim Allen's apartment, or what would have been his apartment if he had never, or maybe his condo, if he had never become Santa Claus. So like a broom closet and what could be like a one-shot scene in a hotel party room with a lot of windows is the only extra sets we have in this movie. So like it's arguable that like the entire budget was like 90% of it was for actor salary, and the other 10% was for minimal VFX, because the VFX were not that great in this movie. There was some like icing effects where they're like using ice powers, and then at one point they thaw out, and there was not as much in that department as there had been in the first and the second movie. The second movie utilized it a lot more, and it was well done. Again, $65 million budget. Though to say, they reduce, if we accept that it was a $12 million budget, which I highly doubt. I mean, even if you just want to factor in, like I've said in previous episodes, you factor in the advertisement, you have to bring the budget up to like at least $15 million. It still made $110 million in the box office, so it's not anything to scoff at. Between the three movies now, we're closer to like $400 million, like $450 million across this franchise, which is quite substantial, and it makes sense why they would bring it back. And it took a quite a long time, 2006 to 2022, but I am so glad we have the Santa Clauses. And I'll digress. I don't want to jump into that too soon. So the Santa Claus 3, probably the most panned. It has the worst box office reception. Even though it made quite a bit of money, the story is a bit broken. I do like the message at the end when they bring it back around. It's about family, and Christmas is about family, and he's gonna Santa Scott, Tim Allen, there's a lot of names for this character now, this actor. He opens up the secret of Santa, and he tells his in-laws that he's Santa Claus, and that his their daughter is now Mrs. Claus. But all that comes around, and he's struggling to juggle his home responsibilities, and Carol, Mrs. Claus, Elizabeth Mitchell, who did return, she's pregnant. He's having his second child now. He's starting a new family. He's older, he has more responsibilities, and he's starting a family. So it's kind of like what was in the second movie. It's about juggling your home responsibility and your work responsibility, and then as you get older, both of these things just get bigger and bigger. You have more responsibilities at home, you have more responsibilities at work. And they did a good job of that, and especially when you add in the in-laws and the holidays, and they really did do a good job of, like, it causes fights, you tick each other off, some people, sometimes it gets heated. And then on the work side of it, they introduce Jack Frost. That's Martin Short's character. And according to Tim Allen, what he says is one of the biggest flaws in the movie is you got one of the other one of the funniest comedians, actors out there, Martin Short, and you put him in the movie with Tim Allen, and they didn't even have like powerful scenes together. There was no like comedic scenes between them. They had a few interactions, but there was like overarching things happening, and it was mostly focused on like Jack Frost is trying to upstage Santa, and the legendary figures, they all come back. Tamara Taylor comes back, Peter Boyle comes back, Art LaFleur comes back. That's Mother Nature, Father Time, and the Tooth Fairy. Art LaFleur was Tooth Fairy, and or in the second one he wanted to be renamed Molinator. I found, that was kind of funny. He wanted to have a new name. All these characters come back, and so Jack Frost, he's another, legendary figure. He doesn't have a holiday. He's feeling kind of shafted. He wants Jack Miss or Jack of July, Jack 4th of July, something like this. And he sees an opportunity to kind of mess with Santa, and he takes some like probation instead of being kicked off the council, or whatever they refer to their legendary figure. I believe it was council. So instead of being kicked off the council, he's going to be on probation. He's going to try to help out around the North Pole and learn something from Santa. Kind of plays to his ego, get them to stand down. And he has a plot to kind of ruin, Scott's Christmas, to mess with Santa. He's, turning the heat up on the oven. He's jamming up the printing press for the naughty list, stuff like that. And then as this goes on, he's kind of egging Curtis on again. They did a really good job writing Jack as being kind of like somebody that can get under your skin and rile you up. And he's one of those guys he'll try to get information from you by telling you that you don't know it, which would offend you, and then make you explain it. Well, of course I know how to make Santa not Santa anymore, but you just have to grab his snow globe and he has to say, I wish I wasn't Santa anymore, and bam, he wouldn't be Santa anymore. The escape clause is what they terminologied it. That was a mouthful. Is the term they use, the terminology they use for it, the escape clause. So the first movie, the Santa Claus; the second movie, the Mrs. Claus; and the third movie, the escape clause. And so Jack is now on this mission to find the snow globe, and this is where Lucy, Lillian Mummy, she returns as Lucy, and she unwittingly, again, she doesn't know that Jack is trying to do this. He's trying to pull a fast one on them, hoodwink them, and he succeeds. He manages to get Santa, get Scott to say, I wish I'd never become Santa, after a whole day of just like disasters at work, disasters in the factory, and then Jack upstages him at home, and he doesn't upstage him, he ruins their tree trimming party, and like he looses the tree so that it's going to fall over and it's going to break some of the ornaments, and one of those ornaments is like really meaningful to Carol. And then the in-laws are angry, and then Carol's upset, and Scott's angry, and Jack is trying to play the friend, and it does a really good job. And then they take my caveat to this would be that they take a really long time to get through all of this, and a lot of the movie is just like bickering and small scenes that are like slowly moving the plot, and then you get to what would be like the pinnacle of the movie, and oh no, he said like, I wish I wasn't Santa, and Jack is handing him a gift, and it happens to be his snow globe, and he realizes like, oh no, what have I done? And in this moment, it transports him back in time with Jack, because he throws his arms around him, and Martin Short and Tim Allen, they're transferred back in time to the first movie, and Jack comes up and like hits him in the face with a shovel. He hits Scott in the face with his shovel and steals the coat like before the older version of himself can come out. And when Jack puts the coat on, he becomes Santa. They both like disappear, and they're reintroduced into the timeline, and it's about like 13 years or something in between 1994 to 2006. It's about 12 years or something like that. So I think he says 13. So maybe like coming up on the anniversary of 13 years. And so in this alternate version of time, which very Back to the Future, but unfortunately they don't spend very much time in it. This entire portion of the movie is maybe 20 minutes, and then you're into the ending of the movie. Scott has to figure out like, okay, what's going on? How do I get back to the North Pole? And it turns out that Jack has like turned the North Pole into like a coming attraction. He got rid of the naughty and nice list, and he opened it up to whoever can afford to come to the North Pole. And there's there's some plot holes, obviously, like what happened to the legendary council. They don't seem to be able to influence them as much in so the far that, like, at the beginning when they summon everybody and Jack is trying to upstage Santa, like when he decides to do his like probation and like help out at the North Pole, it's because they were threatening to like take away his powers. And so that doesn't seem to be a problem now. My fan theory is that as Jack Frost, he's not as strong. He doesn't have as much magic. And so if the legendary council tried to strip him of his powers, he would be subject to that. But as Santa is like a bigger legendary figure, and not just in the bowl full of jelly Santa sense of the bigger. He's a much more prominent magical figure. So maybe he has more power. So that was like Jack's plan, that if he could be Santa, he would be able to influence the Council of Legendary Figures. Again, this is just conjecture. This is my fan theory because they don't really talk about it. But he doesn't have to deal with the whole secret of Santa, the whole SOS business, which was like, a big whole part of it, like why Carol had to leave her family and she couldn't go visit and they couldn't visit her and they couldn't know about it. And that's what, Scott has to learn, that it's not as important as family. You don't keep secrets between family. So he's going to tell them that he's Santa Claus. That was my only like caveat. Like, so it's all big and important for Scott. He has to follow the rules, but Jack doesn't. And I guess that kind of, maybe it plays into his personality. Jack is more of the con man, suave. He's going to convince people of things. And I guess over the course of his 12 years of being Santa, because in this alternate universe Jack was Santa for 12 years, but to Scott he doesn't really have the memories. He just pops back in. Like, basically at the moment he popped out of his universe, he popped into this new timeline, but he doesn't really have memory of that timeline, which is decent. It kind of follows the sci-fi idea of like alternate timelines and being passed in between them. Very Back to the Future, very any sort of time travel event in that sense of sci-fi. These arcs and these themes, they have loose rules and guidelines, and I feel like sometimes you have movies that kind of like rewrite their own rules, or you have movies that decide to follow some of the overarching rules of sci-fi and time travel. And in this case, it's a bit of time travel and the alternate timeline, so they did a good job. They get an A+ for that one. And so I'll bring it back to the Santa Claus. My take on Jack as Santa. So they make Jack Frost into Santa, and he's freaking terrifying. He has this short, spiky beard thing and this like not twirled out, but he has this mustache that he's like pulled up like along the side of his beard, and it looks absolutely terrifying. Short hair, and he's wearing more of like his Santa robe is more like a Hugh Hefner like bathrobe, and he has this big blue scarf on, and it was just terrifying compared to what they do for Scott, what they do for Tim Allen when they turn him into Santa. And I guess that was part of it. They wanted this compare and contrast, this idea of that, like, Jack is this, like, he's using it for personal gain, and it's all about the power, and now even the money. He turned, Christmas into capitalism, and like at one point you hear over the PA speaker in this new version of the North Pole that like you can go and sign up to be on the nice list, and parents pay for their kids to be on the nice list. And it's basically, the North Pole is just like a coming attraction, like a new version of Disneyland, and you can pet the reindeer and they look distressed, and all the elves are sad and distraught, and none of them have smiles on their faces, and they're just so miserable. And that was like the overarch, like the plot of the third movie, and they did a good job. I mean, the child actors, all the kids in the movies, and I mean, there's a lot of kids in these movies. Between the first one, they probably had maybe 30 kids in total. You see them in the backgrounds. They're twiddling their hammers. They sing a chorus song every now and then. In the second one, there's a lot more kids. They're doing a lot more things. There's a lot more more depth to the sets. You can see that like there's rows of like 10, 20, 30 kids just in one area. At the end of the second one, there's like the battle scene. There's a scene between all those big soldier guys that I mentioned, and all the kids come running down the balcony. And I mean, in that one scene, there has to be like 50 kids, and they're all in these little elf costumes. They all have these little pointy ears and stuff, and it's very, very elaborate, very well done in that sense. And the same goes for the third movie. There's a lot of elves, and it's very well designed, and they did a very phenomenal job on that. And the kids in the third one, you know, in the first one, in the second one, and in the beginning of the first one, they're all, you know, they're loving life and they're happy and they're singing songs and they're sipping cocoa. And then the contrast to that is in Jack's world, and in this, you know, capitalist North Pole, they're doing dance routines and they're selling, you know, merchandise, and not one of these elves is smiling. They're all sullen and they're all unhappy and they're all frowning, and they did a good job of that, because I mean, it must have been hard for kids in these situations to do these dance routines and to do these parts and to not be smiling. Like, it must have been fun, right? You're having a good time, and now you have to stand there and sulk as you do these scenes. And I can appreciate the effort and the talent that went into that on behalf of these young actors and these young thespians. They have a real talent here. It's quite amazing. And I mean, that was Santa Claus 3 through and through. A lot of people don't like it. It's become a cult classic in its own right, but a lot of people think the first two are great, and then you ask them, like, oh, what do you think of Santa Claus 3? And even me, I like to make the joke, like, I love the Santa Claus movie, and then someone will be like, I made the joke at the beginning. They're like, oh, what about the Santa Claus 3? I'm like, well, it exists. Like, that's a movie that exists, but I still watch it every year. I still watch it maybe twice, 3 times. You know, you just want to have a Christmas movie on in the background, so you go to your list: Home Alone 1, Home Alone 2, the 3 Santa Claus movies, the Grinch one, the original Grinch. You got your Frosty the Snowman, and then you have your The Miracle of Christmas, or I'm forgetting, the Christmas Carol. Yeah, the Christmas Carol. So you got your like Mickey's Christmas Carol, you got your animated Christmas Carol, you got your Muppets Christmas Carol. There are so many versions of a Christmas Carol. It's quite amazing, actually. And that's the Christmas season. You're gonna keep watching these amazing movies. I mean, I barely named a handful of them. Probably one of the ones we watch the most in my family, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That is a hilarious Christmas movie that, again, classic, stands the test of time. Super young Johnny Galecki in that movie, which I didn't mention. In the alternate version of the Santa Claus timeline in the Santa Claus 3, Scott's assistant is Eric Kripke, the character from The Big Bang Theory. That was hilarious. So just he's in literally one scene, and then you don't see him again. But I found it funny that he was there. And then yeah, so I mean, just Christmas movies in general are amazing. The Santa Claus 3, unfortunately, not considered as good as the first two. In my opinion, still a pretty good movie. And that's Christmas movies all in all. This has been the Christmas episode, the first Christmas episode of the Nerd Review. I will do probably another one. It might not come out next week. I will try to record it on Saturday, but next Saturday is Christmas Eve. So it is the 24th, and I am looking out the window right now, and it is a beautiful snowy Saturday afternoon right now. So we have a week between us and Christmas at this point, and I'm going to be watching The Santa Clauses on Disney Plus. That's an amazing series. So let's talk about that for a bit here before the end of the episode. So we're back in the North Pole with the whole gang. Scott is there. Tim Allen is back. Elizabeth Mitchell is back. Charlie Lloyd has, so far, I've seen him in one episode. I've only watched the first 2 episodes. I thoroughly enjoyed them. We love them. Me and my girlfriend, we watched them. We love them. If you've seen The Santa Claus, if you've watched it 2 to 3 times every Christmas for the last 20 years. You can only imagine how much excitement it brings me, and I can only assume other fans, to be back in the North Pole with this version of Santa and this character that has just become such a classic and such a staple of Christmas in my humble opinion. So in the Santa Claus, it's, Scott has been Santa for almost 30 years. It's 28, coming up on 29 years. He's been Santa Claus, and it's coming up on his 65th birthday. Him and Mrs. Claus, Carol, they now have 2 kids. At the end of the 3rd movie, they had their first kid, and now they have 2 kids, and they've grown up in the North Pole, so they're a bit weird. Magic is, everything, and they don't really know how the human world works, and not as many people are celebrating Christmas. And Scott, he's starting to think about retirement, and honestly, it's an amazing series. I love the episodes so far. I'm so excited to watch more of it. I couldn't have imagined getting a series like this with the episodes are 50 minutes each. You put 2 episodes together, you have a movie. There's going to be like 8 episodes. It's so much content, so much great content that I'm going to be instantly in love with. I'm completely biased. I have no objective opinion other than I'm going to love every episode, and I look forward to watching all of them, and it's going to be great, honestly. So I totally recommend it. I don't want to give away too much. Like, I could talk about the entire series right now, but I don't want to give away spoilers. It's brand new, and I've only really watched the first 2 episodes, and in those 2 episodes, it's 2 hours of content. So like it's a movie in and of itself. There's so many great reveals, and they're covering so many different aspects. And I mean, if there's only 8 episodes, and I say only, you put those 8 episodes together, and if they're the same runtime, that's 4 movies. That's the runtime of 4 movies, right? That's 2 hours at a piece each episode. 2 episodes put together, 2 hours. You have 8 episodes. You got 4 movies right there, and I mean, that's amazing. And some of the things that they're covering are, if you've ever had a conversation or thought about this universe, like what happened to the original Santa Claus. Like if he died, did he die? Did he just phase out of existence? And what happened to did he have a wife? What if he had a Mrs. Claus? Because apparently it's a contract. So did her wife disappear? And these are some of the things that are on the fan pages and the Wikipedia pages, and if you go to there's a subreddit for the Santa Claus, and other reviews and other videos, and it's amazing that it's fan service. They've looked at this online and they've acknowledged these theories and these ideas, and they're actually addressing them in the content is quite amazing, and it's something that I love when it's done right. And to be honest, Disney, they kind of hit it out of the park lately. They do really understand what fan service is all about, and I mean, this is going to be an amazing journey. So that's what I'm going to spend my ramp up to Christmas doing. I'm going to watch the rest of the Santa Claus series, and I can only highly suggest it to any other Santa Claus fan, or if you want to jump on the bandwagon now, it's all available on Disney Plus. Not a sponsor, just a fact. So if you're interested, go check out Disney Plus. And that'll be it for today's episode. So I hope you've enjoyed the nerd review of the Santa Claus 1, 2, and 3, and a bit about the Santa Clauses, the new series on Disney Plus. And I hope you have a great holiday season. This has been the Nerd on the Nerd Review, and this is the Nerd signing off.